Brands can bicker all they want inside the showroom behind glass doors, and we absolutely love it, throwing this and that and facts at one another. Competition is always going to be good and healthy. Competition is good. A Comparo, well, that's even better. Such as what we have here today. This is the GAC Empow and this is the MG GT. Two cars that hail from the East with obviously European influences. Now today on this Comparo, as you would expect, we're going to find out which one has the edge over the other and which one we think you should take home. Are you looking to compare prices for your brand new car? Well then, visit AutoDeal.com.ph, select the car that you want, and choose to request for a quote from our network of over 500 official dealer partners nationwide. Within minutes, you'll start receiving offers from the dealers you've selected. All that's left is for you to select the deal that's best for you. Get the best deal on AutoDeal. Let's begin with what's under the hood. In the MG, you have a 1.5-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged gasoline engine that produces 159 horses and 250 Nm of torque mated to a 7-speed DCT. Now on the highway, it does roughly closer to 15 kilometers per liter. In city driving, with the heavy Metro Manila traffic, you're looking at real-world driving about 9 kilometers per liter. We move on to the Empow. The Empow is also powered by a 1.5-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged gasoline engine, but this time it produces 168 horses and 270 Nm of torque. Fuel efficiency-wise, it does almost the same, really about 9 kilometers per liter inside hellish traffic of Metro Manila and just a tad less on the highway at about 13.5 kilometers per liter. I'm sorry, 14.5 kilometers per liter. So not a very big difference between the two. However, we will argue, however it is that you want to put it, that it does carry a bit more horsepower and about 20 Newton meters more of torque. And since the fuel figures are just basically the same, we will give the Empow the nod when it comes to the engine. However, what that engine translates to compared to, or rather mated with the transmission, the suspension and whatnot, that is a completely different category, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But for now, we'll give it to the Empow. Now, although looks are definitely subjective, we have to give our opinion to complete this Comparo. So let's begin. They both have very large grills up front and they both have sleek lights. But I will say that on the Empow, the execution is that it looks just a bit wider thanks to the air intakes found down here. There are air intakes found on the MG as well, but the execution of the Empow makes it look much wider, much more stable. Here, it's much more compact and in the chest, so to speak. They both hunker down as if they were at the starting gate, we're just waiting for the gun to go off and they're ready to go. I will say that it does have a lower profile all throughout the entire automobile on the Empow, whereas in the MG, it kind of raises at the back. It's nowhere near crossover levels, as according to Carlos, but it does look a little raised, better still on a sedan that keeps it low. Now, the overall shape of the automobile, I love on both of them because they have this beautiful, beautiful fastback appeal with a large rear windshield, and both have chrome accents that stretch from the A-pillar all the way to the back that just accentuate that. It just looks absolutely gorgeous. And then the small little tail finisher at the rear. They both have their faults as well because, well, they both have tail finishers on both sides of the automobile, but they both don't use it because their exhausts are found underneath. I feel that that's really a miss. But if we are going to give our preference, truth be told, I'd say that we're going to give it to the MG for the following reasons. Number one, well, the grille on the MG does just look slightly better than that on the Empow. That's number one. Number two are the lights. Although they're both sleek, we feel that the execution of the front headlights up front just look a little better on the MG. The rear lights, however, I know this is kind of backtracking, but the rear lights on the Empow I do like better because it's got this wide horizontal Lexus look on it. But the last thing that we gave to, or rather the last point that made us choose the MG, is that the wheels on this car are actually a bit better than they are on the Empow. Granted, these were lifted from the ZST, but hey, they actually are bagay to this particular car than they are to this. So if it comes down to the nitty-gritty of it, the slight edge will go to the MG, and so we'll give it the nod. Now we move on to practicality. Now obviously these cars won't be able to carry balikbayan boxes because it's just too tiny. I did bring a balikbayan box, but it's folded. So that will show you just the amount of space that you have inside with carry-on luggage, just to show you just exactly how big the automobile is. Now if we move on to the GAC, this is something I gotta show you. I opened this with a button. Unfortunately, with the GAC, you cannot open the trunk without the key fob or without the button inside. However, like I said, the space is roughly the same when it comes to the depth and the width of the car and the small opening. You still won't fit a balikbayan box, but you've got, at the very least, I'm assuming, minimum 375 liters of space, possibly minimum of 400. So they're exactly alike in that sense. Where they differ is where the seats fold, because in the GAC, the Empow's backrest splits 60-40. While in the GT, it's the whole chalupa. So while in the GT, you do have a button that opens the trunk very, very easily, in the Empow, you're still sort of like dependent on the key fob. We will say that practicality-wise, we'll give it to the Empow simply because, well, when you load something much longer inside the automobile, you still also have the space to be able to put somebody else inside the third row. Then there's also the fact that if you do have the key fob with you, you don't necessarily need to press any buttons because there's an approach feature which should turn on right about now, which should open the rear. See what I mean? I planned that. I timed it perfectly. Jack, did you see that? We need to put this on one of the shorts, man. That was, we win. So now we're gonna move on to interior comfort, or as Jack likes to call it, passenger accommodation.
I never said that.
Yeah, you did. So inside the Empow, first, we've put the seats, both the Empow and the GT, the same as what we refer to it as bastos. This is Jack's driving position.
So are you implying I'm bastos?
No, I'm not implying. You're missing the point here. This is how Jack sits down in the driver's seat if he doesn't care about who's sitting behind him. So we wanted it that way because obviously he doesn't care about me. And this is what it looks like when Jack is sitting up front in his bastos position. And since I'm not a very tall person myself, leg room is still okay. I have a little bit of a stretch there. Headroom is good. Okay, now the seats, the interior is sporty. It's got several textures, not just on the seats itself, but on the door as well. Not too overpowering with the red. Just right. You have an air vent in the center with a charging point too. No center armrest. Now the biggest thing about the rear seats is, well, the rear seats themselves, duh. This leather I like because it's not shiny. It's a bit on the matte side, and the seats feel like they're much firmer. It goes with the motif of the sportiness inside the automobile, where you really sink in a little bit. It's not exactly a bucket seat, no, not at all, but you sit in and you feel like, well, if you put on your seatbelt, you really feel like you're strapped in and ready to go for whatever it is that the person that's going to be driving is going to throw at you. Let's move on to the front seat, shall we? I'm going to leave the seat in Jack's bastos position. I can barely reach the pedals. No, I can't reach the pedals. There are almost no piano black plastics inside this automobile in the areas that you do touch, except maybe for the aircon controls. found here. But I like the fact that there are aircon controls. We'll get to the tech a little bit later. The seats are similar to that in the back in the sense that you feel very dialed into the car, very much low and snug and engaged in the seats. There are soft touches here, the red and the dashboard itself. There's still plastics up on top. This, I don't mind it, but some people might find this faux carbon fiber a bit much. It's neither here nor there. I don't mind it at all. It's okay. I like it, the fact that it goes with this very good looking electronic shifter. I like the way that looks. It's very nice. There are cubby holes on the door. There's space underneath here which can hold Jack's very large bottle. The cup holders are a bit odd inside this car, because it won't fit a 1.5 liter bottle. It will on the side if you really force it. But the cup holders won't fit a 1.5 liter bottle, but a normal bottle will fit in there. The issue is that one cup holder is yes. The second cup holder is a no for much taller items, because you won't be able to close this here. But the size of this cubby hole is, look at that. That's nice. Not a phone charger, but there is a nice spot for your phone to be somewhat secure and snug. Bit of a hassle are the USB charging points, because they're found here underneath. It's a bit cumbersome to get to, either for the driver or the passenger, so you're going to want to set that in before you get going. The steering wheel is polyurethane. Could have been softer, to be honest with you, but the nice thing is that inside this automobile you have a telescopic steering wheel. Let's move on to the GT, shall we? Oh, sorry, sunroof. Forgot about the sunroof. Yes, let's move on to the GT. Now, in the GT, the rear seats, same thing, bustos position. Space is really almost the same. The headroom is slightly less here, and the fact that the seats are not as flat, they're a bit couchier, so to speak. There is a lumbar support, so you feel like you're a bit sort of like elevated from the seat itself. Now, what that does is that your head is actually closer to the headliner here at the corner, because the seats are plumpier. What that means, what that means is that it's actually more forgiving. It's softer, it's a little bit more comfortable, it's not as sporty, but roughly the space is roughly the same when it comes to your leg room. Just the headroom is a little bit less there. The leather in here, however, is not as nice as I found than that in the Empow, because here, although it is leather with some stitching here, and then you've got some textures up here as well, same as the Empow, the leather is a bit shinier in the sense that it squeaks a lot more. I'd like the matte of the Empow just a little bit more. Now, amenities wise, you do also have bottle holders on either side. You have the same one air vent here and one USB charging point, but you do have this small little cubby here that can hold trinkets and whatnot. Same, no center armrest with cup holders. Also, for a third passenger, the tunnel here in the GT is much higher than that of the Empow, so that might be a bit uncomfortable. Okay, same thing, can't reach the pedals. Inside, the softness and the rubberiness of the seats from the rear continue here up front. It's much softer though. It feels a bit more comfortable. Not better, no, not just yet. It's more comfortable, meaning that it's more accepting, whereas the seats of the Empow really are just sportier and more engaging. Here it's a bit more relaxed. It feels like it is actually a bigger sedan, simply because of the softness of it. There are more plastics apparent here in this particular area, because here there are no soft touches. It's very much plasticky here. There's a lot of textures that you can found here, and including the honeycomb that you find on the seats, right? All in all, it feels like it's more, I hate to use the term, but it's more driver oriented in this, in the sense that it tilts a bit to the driver a bit more. And the fact that this particular infotainment system feels like it's facing the driver and services the driver and the driver alone, whereas in the other automobile it feels like it's shared because it's just so big. The doors, a lot of plastics on the door, much less soft touches, touch points on the door here. Cubby holes, there are on either door. There are cup holders here, but they're not very big. Earl, can you grab the bottle from the other automobile so I can show? There is a center cubby hole that isn't as big as the Empow, but here, I'll show you just exactly, right? It's much, much smaller. But the cup holders here are definitely much more practical because they will fit a normal size bottle, not this bottle, in there. The piano blacks, there are more piano blacks inside this automobile in the sense that even the gear lever has piano blacks on it. I don't know how good of an idea that is. And these areas here, which isn't really a lot of traffic when it comes to your hands, but this is piano black and I'm not too sure about that. What I am sure of is that although that there isn't a go-through that you can put Jack's bottle as we did in the other automobile here, I am sure that the pad that you put your mobile phone on is much bigger. You can put much more things here, and it's much easier to get to the USB ports in this automobile than it is in the other car. The downside, however, even though that they have the same sunroof available to you, is that this steering wheel, although it's got paddles, but we'll talk about the tech later, does move up and down, but it's not telescopic. And that might be a big issue when it comes to finding the proper driving position for any individual if you're going to compare this car with the Empow. So the GT against the Empow, that is it. Not to say that the execution of the interior of these cars were bad in any way whatsoever. It's just that one definitely has the advantage of the other. And in this particular case, we're inclined to really give it to the Empow for reasons that, well, the seats, when you're on them, it feels like you're in the automobile and not on top of the automobile when you're inside the Empow. You also can't deny that the leather feels better in the Empow. It's not as rubbery as you find in the GT. Then the fact that there's also the driver comfort. You can't deny that having a telescopic steering wheel is ever so slightly better than non-telescopic steering wheel because you can find the proper driving position. And the fact that, well, it's easier to get into the car that way and have it adapt to you instead of you adapting to the automobile. So for this particular category, when we're talking about interior comfort, we will give our vote to the Empow. Now we're going to move on to tech, and there's a lot going on in these automobiles, and I purposely stepped out of the car because I wanted Jack to get up close and personal to the tech that is available inside these cars as close as possible. So let's start with the Empow. Now, when it comes to tech, these two automobiles have a lot in common, so much so that it would take forever and a day to enumerate every single one of them. So we have flashed it up on the screen for you. You can pause this video at this point, or you can head on over to AutoDeal.com.ph to see the complete list of what these guys have in common with one another. But what is unique on the Empow is that you've got features like automatic windows for the front and rear passengers. That's actually very nice. Then you've got stuff like low speed follow inside the car, autonomous emergency braking. You have a large 10.25 inch screen. However, that 10.25 inch screen only doubles as a reverse camera and a reverse camera only. And it also only has Apple CarPlay, no Android Auto inside the GAC. However, just as an addition, I don't know how often you're going to use it, but this car does have launch control. And if I were a child, that on its own will already win. But I'm not a child. I only look like one, and act like one, and think like one. This is not looking good for me. Now on the GT, unique to it is, well, it's got paddle shifters, it's got heated side mirrors, I don't know how often you're going to use that. It's also got cornering brake control, which is very, very important. Inside, you have a smaller screen. It's only 10 inches, not a 10.25, but on that smaller screen, you do have a 360-degree camera. Also very important. And at the same time, technology-wise, not only does it have Apple CarPlay, but it also does have Android Auto. Now, while it doesn't have launch control, again, as a child, I would like the one thing that's in this, which is there's a timer where you can time yourself going from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour. So on that merit alone, again, as a child, this would win. Why, I really am a child. Now, while this category was very difficult to call, we actually wanted it to be a tie. Unfortunately, we have to stick to our guns and call out the winner. We will say that on the Empow, technology-wise, it's better executed. But because the MG is packed more with features, then we are going to give the point to the MG when it comes to technology. Fortunate enough to be in an area where we have both twisties and straight highway roads, even cars that are passing on the wrong side. I can tell you that I'm glad that we're actually doing this in these roads, because these two cars seem to have two very different and distinct driving personalities, in the sense that now that we're in the twisties, in the Empow, it feels like it really wants to engage more with the road, more with twisties. It's sharper. It feels like it wants you to push it. That extra 20 Newton meters may not sound like a lot, but it is plentiful when you're trying to carve from a decline back into an incline and down again and up again. So that extra torque actually feels very, very good. It's sharp. It seems to point and go kind of a thing. And the fact that the steering is very much engaging. It's not too heavy, so you can actually twist and turn any way that you'd like. I will also add that when you're driving the automobile, since the leather in here is not as rubbery as we said in the MG, it may feel as if that you slide out of your seat every once in a while once you push it. But the nice thing about it is that the seats actually feel a little bit deeper. Not bucket seats, so to speak, but enough that it will keep you in place so that you can really play all that you want. So really, it's the kind of car that, unfortunately, I have to say, may not be the best inside traffic, because the transmission can get a little jumpy. It takes some time to get used to. But when you're out on the open road, it does feel much better. And twists and turns, yeah, it feels great inside this car. Now, also, like we said in our review, it isn't just at low speeds where you feel a little jump in the transmission. Even when you're crawling uphill, there's still, you can feel the throttle sort of like play on and off and on and off, especially when you're following a car in front of you that just isn't as lead-foot or as spirited as you are when you're driving. But sans that, when you really have complete and control of the road, then yeah, this car is definitely a lot of fun to push. Although, full disclosure, regardless of how much fun it is to push an automobile and carve it through roads, this is not exactly my type of enjoyable driving. I'm more of, well, the mellow type. Have to admit though that no matter how fun it is to drive this car during twisty roads such as this, and truly it is very fun to drive, I don't drive like this very often. More often than not, I'm not alone inside the automobile. I've got either Jack with me or I've got my family in tow inside the car. And the last thing I want to do is throw them around like an unsecured rag doll in the back seat, or a in a box. A what?
What's in a box?
Why did you want me to say that? I'm serious. Can we talk? Are you okay? Do you need somebody to speak to? Talk to me, Jack. It's okay. This is a safe space. In the MG GT, really it's a very, very different drive. You can feel that the Empow does have a surplus of power, but truthfully, when are you ever going to use that surplus of power if, like myself, you're always going to be inside the city anyway? I have to admit that the drive in here, the transmission, is very different. There isn't so much of a bite as what you get. They're both DCTs, yes, but it's just easier to drive this when you're accelerating calmly or when you're coming from a stop, especially when you're on the highway. It's a bit more comfortable too on the seats. I will admit though, that even when you're taking like the exit ramp of the highway and you're doing it spritefully, yeah, you tend to move a little bit more inside this automobile because it's not as deep of a seat or as deep of a pocket that your tuchus is going to be in. So yeah, you can definitely feel it, which in turn leads it to be much more of a calm and relaxing drive. It's really, that's what it gives out. You're much calmer, you're not stressed, you're not disjointed from the road. No, you still can feel the road, the steering, it feels good, but it's just more relaxed, more mature. And I'm saying that despite its very flamboyant exterior and its color too. Essentially, I guess it's me. I've always got loud shoes on. You think I'm all hyper and whatnot, but really I'm a timid guy. Get out of frame, man.
Timid?
Yeah, dude, that's so me. Timid and shy. What? Did I say something wrong? Now, if you've seen our previous reviews of each one of these cars by themselves, and I'm sure that the links are somewhere down below, you'll have maybe a better understanding of the drive and the feel of each one. The difficult part about my job for this particular video is trying to find out which one actually works better. And that's very hard to say because one works well in one aspect and the other works well in another aspect. Or no, better said, one is better at one aspect while the other is better in another aspect. To put it plainly, the Empow is better when you want to get spicy and sporty in a little bit and carve a little bit of the road. And the MG GT is just better, well, when you're stuck inside the city and you want a bit more comfortable ride. Both are very sporty looking, however, both have their unique charm about them. So it's very difficult for us to really find which one is better because they both have their merits. Okay, so this is gonna sound kind of like a cop-out, but I'm gonna split it. I'm gonna give half a point to the Empow and half a point to the GT simply because they're good at what they do and they're two different drives, really.
Boo.
What? You want an answer? The answer is I'm really having a hard time. I don't know. I'm starting to lean maybe towards this, but it's gotta be, also inside the Empow when you want it and you need a little bit of that push, it's there. I don't know, man. I just don't know. So really, to be fair, I think half a point for each. Half a point, yeah. All that's left to tell you is how much these automobiles are. The MG GT Sport, the top of the line, comes in at 1,195,888 Philippine pesos. That's for the top of the line. The Empow, the GAC Empow, this mid-tier GB variant, comes in at 1,215,000 Philippine pesos. Not far from each other, roughly about 20,000 Philippine pesos. But must be said that this is the top of the line, this is a mid-tier. There's actually a higher version of this that comes in at like 1,283,000 Philippine pesos. But we wanted to take these two cars together because they are much closer to one another. Now, if you've been keeping score, you'll know that because of the price difference of these two, whether how close it is, that this is the more affordable automobile, that ends up with a tie score. Now, we don't want to end this with just simply saying they're both great, which they are, but I want to be able to impart on you my personal choice, which would be the MG GT for several reasons. One would be, yes, I do occasionally enjoy driving outside of the city and getting a little sporty with the automobile, but more often than not, I have my entire family with me. So maybe slow and steady would actually win the race. I do understand, however, why this would be Jack's choice because, well, it does have that classiness to it, yet when you want to carve mountain roads, this one has the tendency to do it a little bit better than the GT. You kind of get what I'm getting at. Then there's also the fact that, well, it's your personal preference as to which car actually looks better to you. We gave you our opinions, but the only opinion that will really matter at the end of the day is yours. Then the one last thing. I told you that this automobile, the Empow, comes in at 1,215,000 Philippine pesos. To be honest with you, that's actually just for now the introductory price. How long that introductory price holds is anybody's answer or question. Which one is it? At the end of the day, it's really basically what kind of a deal you yourself can get. And the only way you're going to find out is by heading over to AutoDeal.com.ph. Try the Get Quote button. You never know. There are deals that happen every day, even for cars that have just hit the market. With hopes that this video has helped you make a decision and you don't feel as if that we copped out in any way whatsoever, because trust me, it was a very difficult decision to try and figure out which one of these guys would actually win. Or in this case, would be my preference. Know what I mean?